This week on Raw and Smackdown, Nia Jax's in-ring return, Becky Lynch's coronation as champion, Bobby Roode officially adopts Chad Gable, hopefully leading to a My Dad Can Beat Up Your Dad tag match with Jason Jordan and Kurt Angle. And though long anticipated, we pour one out in mourning for the final Rusev Day. My name is Jeremy Goddamn Masters. Welcome to the Masterclass. Raw began as it always does in the darkest timeline, with Roman Reigns carrying the Universal Championship to the ring slung over his shoulder like a sack of rabbit meat to sell in the village square. After challenging Brock Lesnar to come to the ring to face him, Braun Strowman entered the fray. Not satisfied with the disqualification finish to their no disqualification match, but Baron Corbin quickly stepped in to assure them both that they'd get the matchup they wanted November 2nd in Saudi Arabia at WWE Crown Jewel. For anyone who's counting, that's 2 marquee pay-per-views in Saudi Arabia in 6 months and 0 in the UK for, ever. Also, real classy sticking this 5 days after Evolution. First lesson of the night, students, do as I say, not as I do. A part of me wants to believe that Triple H means it when he says he wants to advance the women's division to an equal standing with the men, but his gestures feel pretty hollow when he's balancing out steps towards progress with masturbatory propaganda shows for a despotic monarch who thinks letting women drive is peak civil rights. Oh, and Baron made a Universal Championship match for the main event between Roman and himself. So we're in for a real fucking treat tonight, boys. We had a pretty good match between Ambrose and McIntyre up next, in which Dean narrowly avoided getting counted out only to get pinned off of a Claymore kick. After that, we had the developing surrogacy between Bobby Roode and Chad Gable move forward, as Roode accompanied Gable to a singles match with Victor of the Ascension. Whom I remember, long-haired guy from the front row. God, how I remember them. Gable ended up picking up the win with a German suplex bridge pin, but while celebrating with Roode like he'd just caught his first baseball, Connor broke up the moment by ramming Gable into Roode, continuing the feud for what I refuse to call any reason. Up next, now soloed Dana Brooke took on Bayley in a singles match, and the absolute slog we're putting up with just so Bayley and Sasha can be a staple of the women's tag team division, spoiler alert, is reaching a breaking point. Literally every time they come out, I'm looking for a barbershop window for one of them to get defenestrated through. Bayley picked up the victory with a Bayley to belly after a quick match, and Dana continued a losing streak, even after breaking it off with Titus Worldwide. Lesson 2, watch where you point that blame, Dana. Titus and Apollo may not have made you better, but they kept you on TV, and I don't want to see you slumming it out on main event for the next 6 months. Authors of Pain took on a pair of jobbers with their tiny English manager Drake Maverick, who always looks like their little brother that mom said they have to let play with them. The Undertaker hit the ring next to announce that Shawn Michaels and Kane would be ringside for his match with Triple H in Australia, which I'm sure won't result in chance of "You're a Mayor" from the Aussie Smarks. Then, following a bit of a convoluted thread from earlier in the show, Ziggler faced Rollins for the Intercontinental Championship rematch after Baron Corbin convinced Ziggler to invoke his rematch clause, claiming that Seth wasn't even in the building, and if he didn't show up, he would be stripped of the title. Well, he showed up, and like an hour before the match, so hell of a plan there. Really solid match out of both of these guys as expected, with Dolph and Seth selling their shoulder and back injuries respectively from their cell spots the previous night. But in the end, Seth would retain the title with a stomp, which kind of does nothing here, as no one is under the impression that Dolph is moving on from the IC title picture. And as long as the Shield and the Alsatians of altercations are feuding, that belt is never going to be safe around Seth's waist. Still, it feels like a bit of a wasted move for Dolph to make his rematch tonight while nursing injuries of his own, which leads us to lesson 3. Strike while the iron's hot, unless the hammer is equally hot. Moving on through the show, we had Ronda Rousey attempt to issue an open challenge, which Natalya attempted to answer, but was jumped by the Riot Squad, who caveman carried her onto the ramp as a trophy. It ended in a 6-woman brawl between the Riots, the Bellas, and the Ronda. Elias came out before being interrupted by Bobby Lashley's new manager Leo Rush from 205 Live, followed shortly by Bobby, who had 2/3 of a match with Elias, before Leo Rush's taunting of Kevin Owens on commentary drew his presence, which led to a little Cirque du Soleil routine of Leo Power Rangers flipping over Kevin and Elias, and eventually getting Bobby disqualified by defending himself against Elias. Bobby wasn't perturbed by this at all and foisted Leo onto his shoulders, inviting Elias and Kevin to a friendly chicken fight, but Owens and Elias declined as they couldn't agree as who would be the base. Next up, Mickie James and Alicia Fox took on Ember Moon and a returning Nia Jax. Now, the show took place in Dallas, and Ember Moon is a Dallas native. We know Vince has that thing about never letting people win in their hometowns, but Nia Jax was returning, and a return win is usually a good bet. But the crowd was already hot from a bunch of babyface wins in a row, but Mickie and Alicia are stooges for Alexa at the moment, and there's no reason for them to win against big-name babyfaces if it can be avoided. I'm perplexed by this one. Nia won with a Samoan drop, because she's Nia and it's a Samoan drop. Lesson 4, kids, wrestling math is a lot easier than we make it out to be. In our Raw main event, we had Baron Corbin taking on Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship, and while not great, I couldn't help thinking this match was better than the main event of Hell in a Cell. So I can't complain too much. The match was thrown out when Baron hit Roman with a chair, but he restarted the match as a no disqualification and continued his onslaught for roughly 8 more seconds. I don't even think he got in a second chair shot before Roman was back on his feet. As expected, Braun interrupted, followed by the Malamutes of Malcontent, followed by the Shield, and while the 5 men brawled, Roman finally speared Corbin to retain. Not a bad main event overall. The chaos was handled a lot better than on Sunday and demonstrated well enough our fifth lesson. When handled properly, you can indeed polish a turd. The presence of Seth, Dean, Drew, Dolph, and Braun in the finish of this match acted as a sort of expanded universe to the Star Wars prequel trilogy that is Roman vs. Baron, coating it in a few insulating layers of decency to hide the mountain of suck at the center. On to SmackDown. We opened the evening with Miz TV, where he announced that his match with Daniel Bryan at the Super Showdown would be a #1 contendership match for the WWE title. Maurice ran down Daniel and Brie's relationship and announced that she would be leaving SmackDown for an unspecified period of time, before Bryan interrupted and made straight for the ring to face down Miz. But his first attempt sent him into Maurice, who appeared grievously injured, to the point that medical staff came to ringside to help her. She recovered, of course, as this was just a clever ruse to allow Miz to set up for the skull-crushing finale, which he failed to follow through, and Bryan sent him once more into Maurice to the crowd's delight. Lesson 6, you can apparently kill the crowd's empathy towards domestic violence in roughly 60 seconds. That first bump really desensitized him. Apparently Ronald Reagan was right about that. Next up, Kofi Kingston took on Cesaro in a singles bout, both men putting on the spectacle that we know they can. Cesaro spent the majority of the match in control, working on Kofi's knee, but Kingston's big spots kept him in contention, right up until Cesaro successfully completed the neutralizer for what may be the first time this year. At some point during this match, it was announced that New Day would face the Bar for the tag titles at Super Showdown, proving that they're still relevant to this division. The same, however, cannot be said for New Day's previous challengers. Backstage, Aiden apologized to Rusev for his performance at Hell in a Cell, but Rusev was having none of it. This caused Aiden to curse Lana, whom he apparently believed to be turning Rusev against him. Lana heard this and ran to tell Rusev, but he was already preparing for his match with Shinsuke Nakamura for the US Championship. Way to bounce back, you sultry Slavic grizzly, you. Rusev began his match with Nakamura, with Lana and Aiden arguing at ringside, and Aiden occasionally cheering him on over the mic. Rusev looked dominant in this matchup, but was hindered by Aiden's distractions from his corner, which would be his undoing as it allowed Shinsuke to roll him up for a 3 count, retaining his championship. But before the fallout could come to fruition, Aiden entered the ring and laid out Rusev, shattering the fan-favorite tag team by standing over a broken Rusev and issuing one final happy Rusev Day. Alright, lesson 7, and follow me here. You know when you were a kid and you had, like, your little sister and she would, like, rat you out for everything? So there was, like, this one time you're hanging out with your friends, and to sound cool, you call your dad an asshole, and your little sister heard it, and she was like, I'm gonna tell him when he gets home, and she's like, and you're like, no, what do you want? I'll do anything. And then your dad gets home and you punch him in the face. It turns out that's a solid strategy. Following this great tragedy, AJ Styles took on Andrade Cien Almas in a non-title match, and Almas was instantly on the offensive, laying into AJ to open the match. AJ eventually fought back into it, but would fall prey to a 1-2 punch of counter-offense when setting up for the phenomenal forearm, with Andrade knocking him from the ropes to the floor, and following up with the double knees from the top rope. AJ would ultimately overcome Almas by reversing a hammerlock DDT attempt into a Styles clash before Samoa Joe tried pretty fruitlessly to attack him afterwards. Next up, Asuka took on Billie Kay and actually won with the Asuka lock, bringing her undefeated streak to 1 day. Gotta start somewhere. Finally, we had Becky Lynch's championship celebration to continued raucous applause. She really seems like she's embraced the cocky heel character while respecting that the crowd will love her anyway. Almost immediately, she called Charlotte to the ring, who came as expected and chastised Becky for her dastardly deeds. Becky ignored the lecture and told Charlotte that if she wanted, she could now raise her hand. Charlotte refused, and Becky doubled down. Charlotte could place the belt around Becky's waist. Charlotte refused, and Becky tripled down. She told Charlotte that all she wanted was for her to call her Queen. Bitch. Now, I don't know about you, but I clipped this moment and just ran it on loop for a good 5 minutes for what we're going to call unspecified reasons. But immediately after, communication broke down. Charlotte threw the first punch, but she sure as hell did not throw the last. Becky tossed her around like a weave snatcher in one of those reality shows about weave snatching. I don't know, I don't watch TV. But the show closed with Becky on top, following in a locked-in disarmer and a Bexploder. Final lesson, never quit while you're ahead, just keep chugging right along and never let the voice of reason in your head tell you that you're doing something wrong by kicking someone while they're down. At least that's what the WWE Universe taught me last night. Kids, that's our lot for the week. Make sure to leave some classroom feedback down in the comments section and subscribe for more lessons from me, Jeremy Goddamn Masters. This has been the Masterclass. You're welcome.